and another video from the Royal Armouries.
Welcome to the Royal Armouries. My name is India. I'm a member of the live interpretation team, and it's our job to bring history to life for you. And today's talk is about the SOE, or the Special Operations Executive. Now, before I start, what I'd like to do is just gauge my audience. So, by a show of hands, can anyone here tell me if you know or have heard of the SOE before? Okay, yeah, a fair few. The reason why you will know about that, or may know about that, or have heard about it, is because in the year 2000, the information about this secret army that Winston Churchill had in the Second World War was actually released into public knowledge. Before that point, it was kept an utter secret. Now, what I'm going to do for this particular talk, don't worry, I'm not going to get anyone up to do anything. You're perfectly safe. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the persona on of a lieutenant, a recruiting officer, if you will. And I'm going to be looking amongst you today to decide whether or not any of you have the capability to be a member of the SOE. Now, in terms of the timeline of history, we are in 1939, the beginning of the Second World War. However, the SOE itself wasn't formed until July 16, 1940, where Winston Churchill placed a civil servant called Hugh Dalton at his head and instructed him with a very important and famous quote, which was, "Set Europe ablaze." Now, the primary focus of the SOE, the Special Operations Executive, was to sabotage and subvert the enemy across the seas. Now, does anyone here know what the word sabotage means and would like to tell everybody else? Don't worry, I don't bite. Anyone want to hazard a guess what you might think sabotage stands for? No, you're all too scared of me this morning. That's alright. Yes, oh dear. So sabotage basically means to cause mayhem to the enemy, the Nazi. We are trying to cause as much demoralization as possible. We are going to infiltrate enemy lines in secret. This is done in secret in a clandestine way, which I will explain in a moment. Basically demoralizing and making them feel very, very sad about being Nazi Germany. Does anyone know what subversion stands for? Subversion? Again, I had to look this one up. Yes, subversion.
Making people believe stuff that isn't true.
Absolutely. That's a very good way of putting it, actually. Keep my eye on you. Yes, subversion, making people believe stuff that isn't true, is the creation of black propaganda. So we did various things to create black propaganda during the Second World War, which I will explain momentarily. But again, this is always to cause absolute mayhem for our enemy. Now, in about 1943, a lot of agents were dropped into the field in France. Now, it's going to be called F section to you instead of France. And they were dropped in by a Lysander plane. Don't worry, if you are successful in being picked by me as a member of the SOE, you will be learning how to use a parachute and jumping out of a plane. I'm going to send you to Ringway Airfield, which is now Manchester Airport, and you will learn everything you need to know there. But one of the most important parts is, when these agents were dropped into France, surprisingly, a lot of them were in fact women, not men. And this is because, if you think about it, there wasn't a lot of able-bodied men just wandering around in Nazi-occupied France. They were all off serving already. So a woman was a lot less suspicious. Now, I am slightly biased in saying this, but women also have a wonderful ability of staying calm under pressure, which was a huge advantageous point as well. Now, as part of your training, what am I looking for amongst you today to be members of the SOE? Well, one of the first things I'm looking for is an excellent grasp of languages. Who here can speak another language besides their own? I don't know why I've got my hand up because I can't. Anyone here speak another language? Brilliant, brilliant. That's brilliant because we are about to send you off to France. a lot of our agents spoke the language or even came from there. They were dual nationality. Anyone here dual nationality, come from 2 different countries? Yes, absolutely. So that is something that we are looking for amongst agents, and I'll explain why. First of all, if you can speak the language, that's brilliant. I'm about to send you off to France. You're going to stick out and sore thumb if you can't speak the language. But secondly, if you do come from a different country, you have an understanding of clandestine lifestyle. Now, clandestine basically means a foreign way of living. Now, this is very, very important as part of your training, because I want to ensure that when I drop you into Nazi-occupied France, you aren't going to get yourself into trouble, you aren't going to be caught by the Gestapo. So, an example of why this is so important was an agent of mine that I sent off. He was in France, and he didn't understand that in France there was different milk and sugar rationing. He tottered into a nice cafe, and he ordered a café noir, which means a black coffee. Now, if you're in a cafe where they don't have any milk, you're not going to be ordering a café noir, you'll just ask for a coffee, because that's the only thing you're going to get. This meant that he was captured and caught by the Gestapo, because they realised that he didn't understand the rationing of where he was. So something as small as that can catch you out. Not only that, but when I do send you off into France, you aren't going to be wearing a uniform like me, because that will definitely give you away. You're going to be wearing civilian clothing. And as part of your training in clandestine lifestyle, we will provide you with clothing that suits where you're going. Because there were different fashions, and there were certain things, for example, on a zipper on your fly, in England, they used to have a little logo on it that said lightning. That was a very English thing to have. So what they did is they got a dentist drill and they removed it. Something as small as that will give you away. So I'll be providing you with clothing to blend in better. However, the training. Now I'm already impressed with some of you. What will you be doing? Well, I'm going to send you up to a shooting lodge in Inverness-shire. It's beautiful there, very rugged landscapes. I'm going to send you out there and we're going to do a lot of cardio. You're going to be running around, climbing up mountains, down again, scaling down them, on your hands and knees. You're going to be very tired. The point is, I want you to be in your best physical fitness. I'm also going to be teaching you how to survive in the wilderness. There is a reason for that, and that's because I can't guarantee when I send you to France, you're going to be in a lovely, cushy chalet somewhere. No, you might be living out in the woods, in the wilderness, so I need to give you all the tools you need to survive. There is also other things that I'm going to be teaching you. I've already covered clandestine lifestyle, but some of the things to do with what I have here on the table. Now, you will be jumping through various hoops, and I will give you various psychological tests. However, if you are successful, and I send you to the finishing school down in the New Forest, who here has heard of Dorset? Show of hands. Oh, it's lovely there. The New Forest is brilliant. I'm from the New Forest, so I'm very biased. But there's a place called Bewley House. Now, at the moment, this particular house has a lovely Top Gear exhibition and lots of lovely cars. But they do have a SOE exhibition as well, because this is your finishing school. And this is where all of your training goes up a notch. Now, it was here, at this part of your training journey, that you were finally told what it was you were training for. So at this point you had no idea, but here you were told you're going to be a member of the SOE, Winston Churchill's secret army, you're going to be infiltrating enemy lines, and especially for women. This was the first time that women were allowed on the field. There is one other exception of a woman who served in World War I, and she was an exception. Other women did serve, but not on the field. This was the very first time. And the stuff that you would be doing was very dangerous and very scary. So, I will say, being a member of the SOE is voluntary. You can decline. I won't hold it against you. But if you do at this point, I'm going to be sending you somewhere that sounds very ominous, which is called the Cooler. And I'm going to be sending you there for about 3 months and encouraging you very nicely to forget everything I've just taught you over the last couple of months before I send you back off into normal society. But if you said, actually, no, I think I want to stay, I want to be a member of the SOE, your training will get harder. One of the things I'm going to be teaching you is how to endure torture without giving away information. Now, it sounds very serious, but it is a possibility that you might be captured by the enemy, especially if they suspect you, and you have to endure it. Now, there are ways of doing it, and I won't go into detail, but there were people who were captured and tortured, but survived and lived to tell the tale. Unfortunately, some others did not. But it's important that I give you, like I said before, all of the tools necessary. I'm also going to be teaching you fighting styles, fighting techniques, how to defend yourself and quickly dispatch of your enemy as efficiently as possible. That brings me on to the stuff here. It's almost as if I planned this talk. Now, has anybody seen this particular style of knife before and happens to know the name of it? You might see it on badges of any SAS, commandos, military. Anyone want to tell me the name? Either one of you? I'm going to send you to Beauty House, is that alright? I'm going to pack your bags, off you go, down south, very good. Yes, we're very close. Fairburn Sykes. Now it's called the Fairburn Sykes fighting knife because it's named after two gentlemen who created it, William Fairburn and Eric Sykes. Now they were two policemen at the time, two English policemen in Shanghai, which was one of the most dangerous cities in the world at the time. And when they were there, they learned various Eastern martial arts, including Jiu-Jitsu. And when they were there, they also developed this knife. But I'm going to come back to this knife in just a second. The first thing I'm going to do is tell you about these fighting techniques that they have put together. Now, it was called the ungentlemanly art of warfare, or gutter fighting. And it was two different fighting styles. I didn't come up with the name, but it was combatto and defendo. Sounds pretty simple in principle, but combatto was a combination of jiu-jitsu and the kind of fighting you've all seen down the pub on a Friday and Saturday night. It wasn't honourable, it wasn't chivalric, it was getting rid of your opponent as quickly as possible. I mean, pulling hair, gouging out eyes, even kneeing in the groin, okay? That's the kind of stuff we're going to be doing, because somebody my size needs to be able to take on someone twice as big and win as quickly as possible. So you're going to be learning those fighting techniques, and you're going to become experts. However, returning to this knife was also developed by William Fairburn and Eric Sykes, who came up with that style of fighting. And if you're interested in more fighting techniques, we have a gallery just up there. You take the stairs up round and around, tucked away in the corner. There's some lovely videos. But this was very important. Now, it's called a fighting knife, but actually it's a lot more similar to a dagger. The reason being, a dagger has two sharp sides and a sharp Shanghai stiletto-like point. Now, a knife is what you guys have at home to butter bread with. You have it sharp on one side and blunt on the other. That's what makes the difference. Now, this knife was developed very quickly, but it was developed over a period of time through exploration, and they came up with this length of blade on purpose. Does anyone know why it was this specific length, and it wasn't shorter, it wasn't longer? Anyone want to hazard a guess? It's not a trick question? Yes?
Punch of the heart.
Absolutely. No matter where I stick this knife, it's going to hit a vital organ. Sounds gruesome, but important, especially if they're wearing lots of layers in the winter. This is silent, but deadly. Now, the way you would use it, I'm not going to go into too much detail, because I've got some little ones in the audience, but I am specifically going to be telling you, please do not wield it like this. You might see this in some pop culture films, people wielding a knife like this. Also, even in medieval manuscripts, they wield it like this. And the reason I say don't use it like this is because this can easily be disarmed and taken off and redirected. The way it was designed to use, you'll notice this lovely ergonomic vase-shaped handle, was that it went into your palm and you held it with your thumb and your forefinger underneath the cross. And from here, this was where you were going to go. You were going to do this. Now, it's very hard to disarm me with somebody coming at me like this. Hopefully, you won't be coming at anyone face to face. You'll be doing it secretly and going up behind them. But what you could do is go up behind the person, stick it in their neck, jugular, and punch forward. It's as simple as that. This was developed by a company called Wilkinson Sword. You've all heard of them, they make our razors today, and they were at first making them all by hand, but later on they developed them a lot quicker, and they even came up with a black blade. Because if you see, this one's lovely and shiny, and it gives off a glints. Now if you're in the moonlight, and it glints in the moonlight, it's going to give you away. So he came up with a lovely black blade on this one. But moving on to something slightly different, something you're probably all familiar with, being in an art and arm museum. This pistol, it's very different from a normal pistol. It was developed in America. Again, does anyone know the name of this? It is, well, the first person who knows the name of it most of the time. It sounds very heroic. It's called the Liberator, the FP-45 Liberator. It was made in America by a lamp company, and it was very, very cheap to make. They called it the Woolworths gun because of how cheap it was, for those of you here who actually remember Woolworths. Now, this was great in a pinch, however, because it was so cheap, it didn't necessarily work as efficiently as it should have done. So, this was dropped into the field, and when it was dropped in with a comic book and a pencil. The pencil was important, it wasn't for doodling. It was so that when you used this, it wasn't self-ejecting. So you'd use it and you'd fire it, but then the shell was still inside. So what you need to do is get your pencil and push it down there and push the shell out. Now this came with 8 rounds, which was placed in the bottom here, which you then have to feed in yourself. However, my advice, use this once and chuck it away. If you used it more than once, it was more likely to blow up in your hands. So, use it once to get hold of something better and then get rid of it. Some people argue you'd have more luck harming somebody simply by chucking it at them at this rate. However, I'm not going to be harsh about this weapon. We were grateful for anything at the time. But yes, the Liberator 45 was good, however, for psychological warfare. Because nobody knew about this weapon, even the people making it didn't know what it was. They thought it was a flare gun. It meant that when we said over the radio we're dropping 250,000 of these onto the field, and we could because we made 1 million in just 11 weeks, when they dropped onto the field, we estimated that the Nazis could collect about 150,000, which left 100,000 unaccounted for, which made the Nazis very nervous that in every French household there was a Liberator pistol. So, demoralised the enemy for sure. Now you would have probably become very familiar with a different type of weapon, and that is this. And I will mention at this point actually that all the weapons I have here on the table are real, they're not replicas. They have been made safe to handle, they have been made inert, but they are the real deal, they are the real thing. This is a Colt 1911, you might also hear it be called a Colt 45, and you've become very familiar with this gun during your training. But one fun little fact is you'd be using it in a very different way. We taught you to use it, instead of pushing it out like this and aiming thus, we instead taught you to take it out and use it here, nice and tight into your body. Because 1, it's quicker, and 2, nobody can take it from here. If it's tight in your body, no one's going to take it off you. From here, somebody can try and pull it out of your hands. And we also taught you the double tap method, which is included in a lot of pop culture today. Why did we include the double tap method? Well, if you shot once and it didn't hit, the second one will. So that's why we taught you to fire twice. So you'd get it here, really quickly, bang, bang. And the way that we trained you is we put a large piece of timber on a pulley system, and we would let it go and it would fly towards you as if it were a person. You would use your quick skills to learn how to aim very good with this. However, those are big guns. Does anyone here happen to know the name of this particular weapon that I have in my hands here? Who said that? Sten. Yes, absolutely. I'm going to need a minibus or a train at this rate to send you all down to Beauty House. Yes, it is the Sten. This is the Sten Mark II. This was the second most produced submachine gun in the Second World War. And you'll notice by looking at it, it looks very skeletal. There isn't much about it. The first one that they made, the Stenmark one, had this lovely walnut bit here and a walnut bit here. But wood was expensive at the time to get hold of, and it was heavy. We wanted to get rid of that. We wanted this to be as cheap as possible. And this was manufactured in factories all over England, including Meccano Toy Factory. Now that's quite funny, because when we gave this weapon to the French, they did remark that it looked an awful lot like a toy, but it isn't at all. This can be fired single rate or semi-automatic. Now, if I was going to use this automatic, I could fire 500 rounds per minute. That's a lot. It's not very quiet though, so you would also probably be using it single rate fire. You simply change it by pressing this button here, like this. Now, this gun holds 32 rounds in a magazine. This is a magazine, and these are the bullets. They are known as parabellum. Now, this particular bullet this particular gun was chosen because of this ammunition. This is because the enemy also used this ammunition, so that if you killed somebody, you could use their ammo against them. You would find this was used in a Luger pistol as well. So, this was very, very useful, but it did have its disadvantages, which I'll cover in a moment. But first, let's talk about the good things about this gun. One of them is that, yes, it's very cheap to make. When it was dropped into the field, it was in pieces. You can take this completely apart and put it back together. As I said before, this is real, so it has been pinned in place in certain areas, so I can't. So we'll use our imaginations. So first thing you always do, you take the magazine out of the gun. That makes it a lot safer. This is in safety anyway, but when you take the magazine out, from here what you would do is you unscrew the top, the barrel of the gun. Now I have said it's been pinned in place, so I can't. So I would have unscrewed this and placed it down. I would have taken this, pushed it, so it looks a little bit more like a Thompson now, and from here I'm going to take the end off, simply by pushing down and sliding it off. Now all of this you eventually would have been taught, so that you could, in fact, take it all out, like I've just done there, without looking at it at all, just by feeling. You would have been taught by placing all of this under a sheet and doing it, because when I'm dropping you in, it might be dark, and if you have to assemble this in the dark, you have to do it purely by feeling. So you would have learned how to do it, and it is very quick. Some of my colleagues can do it in about 12 seconds. I'm going to take my time on this bit, because I always end up embarrassing myself. But it's also very important that you're putting it back together correctly as well, because of some of the disadvantages with this weapon, which I will now cover. You can probably see, when I'm putting this back together, that it has a lot of big empty open spaces. Now, this meant that all sorts of debris can get in. This was best fired dry. You can't control the weather. So, it does mean that it did have a tendency sometimes to jam. And you could avoid it jamming simply by the way you were holding it. Now, I want to see people, when you're using this gun, holding it in the correct manner as taught in the manuals. Now, that is as thus. You place this in the squidgy part of your shoulder, because in automatic, this has a tendency to fire upwards. So, hold it in nice and tight. If you have short hands, you can hold it here. However, the manual says to hold it here on the barrel. Now, for those of you who know guns, you might be thinking, but this part gets very hot. So why on earth would you place your hand there? It does get hot if you're using it in automatic, because the kinetic energy of the bullet has to go somewhere. It has to feed through. But if you're using it single rate fire, it doesn't really get very hot. The reason why we tell you to hold it there is because I don't want your fingers anywhere near this part here, this breech. And that is because if I pull the safety pin out now, pull it back into safety here, you'll see that this is open. This is open because the shells of the bullets are travelling out of here. If you place your hand over it, you're going to mean that all the shells are getting stuck in here, and it's going to cause a blockage and mean it's not going to fire. But also, heaven forbid you've got your fingers stuck in there. That's really going to hurt. Because if I use it, that's what's going to happen to your fingers. So, just make sure you don't place your fingers anywhere near here. You can hold it unconventionally underneath the magazine. Very important, underneath. We're not in a film, the matter how cool it looks, and you have seen people wielding this gun like this, we're not going to hold it like this. One, look at this. It's really far away from my body. I've got no control over it. But two, if my hand is on the top and I'm using this like I'm in a Hollywood film, and my hand accidentally presses down, you pull the magazine out. And it's a gun without any bullets. You might as well hit them over the head with this. So that is some of the advantages and disadvantages of the STEM Mark II. But ultimately, this was a brilliant weapon given to the French resistance at a very important time. Now, when you get given these, you're going to probably get given one of these, which is a magazine loader. It takes an awful long time to load a magazine by hand because the coiled spring is getting tighter and tighter. So my advice is if you get one of these, don't lose it. It slides on the top like this and it pins in place. You'll notice now it looks a little bit like a bird's beak. From here, you take your finger, place it on the eye of the bird, and you lift the beak open. You get your 9mm parabellum, and you place it in the bird's beak. Mind your fingers if you try this later. You push it up, and then you pull this up. Now from here, the bullet goes into the chamber up there, and then you press down, and that creates the new gap for your next parabellum to go in there. Now the gold part facing out, like that. And you just keep going until there's 32 in here. Now altogether, this gun weighed about 7 pounds in total when it was fully loaded. But as you're all starting to fall asleep, I'll move on to something a bit different. Why do I have a rat on my table? Does anyone want to ask a guess as to why I have a rat on my table? I'll give you a clue. It was a weapon. Yes, why do you think I put a rat on my table? To scare people. Rats could be very scary, and there was a lot of them, especially in trench warfare. And rodents have a tendency to carry diseases, especially if they're not house pet rats. No? Anyone else? Yes?
Is it a bomb?
It's a bomb. Very good. I'm also sending you to Bewley House. It's a bomb. Yes. So what we did, the SOE did inspire James Bond, Ian Fleming, to write the James Bond novels as well as his term of service. But very similar to how Q gives James Bond his very special, unique little weapons, we created this. Now this is a toy rat, but what we did is we went into London, we posed as the London University, and we collected up loads and loads and loads of dead rats. From there, we got our knives and we cut them open, we pulled out all their smelly inside until it was empty, and then we put in our putty-like explosive to fill the rat back up again. Now, an explosive on its own doesn't do anything, you need a detonator. And our detonator looks a little bit like a hollowed out pencil. Now we put it the only place we had left, up the rat's bum. That's where it went, and it was ready to use. Now when it was ready to use, we dropped these onto Nazi-occupied power plants, and they came across rodents and they wanted to get rid of them because they carried diseases and all sorts. So what they did is they got rid of them by collecting them all up and chucking them on the fire. Well, fire and explosives don't go very well, so boom! No more power plant. A very, very effective means of weapon. However, it was so effective that they quickly cottoned on to what we were doing. But even though we stopped producing these, the Nazis didn't know that we'd stopped producing them. So it was another piece of brilliant psychological warfare, because every time they saw a dead rat or a rodent, they handled it extremely carefully. So that was very demoralising indeed. Now, I've spoken to you a little bit about the weapons you're going to be using, but what roles will you be playing as agents? There's a lot of you here that have huge potential. So, 3 roles. First one is the saboteur. You're going to be blowing things up for me. You're going to be blowing up any sort of transport links, things like that. You're going to be travelling fast, around a lot of camping involved. If you don't like camping, it's not for you. You're not going to be staying in one place very long, which is great, less likely to be captured. The second role is the courier. Very similar to a postal service, you're going to be sending messages to and from different points in France and back again. Very important messages as well. Now, who here can ride a bicycle? Raise your hands. Great. Well, that's good, because that's how you're going to be travelling most likely as a courier. Very conspicuous, by bicycle. Or by public transport. There was a case of Pearl Withrington, who her alternative identity, which you will all be given, was Marie Verges, a cosmetic saleswoman. that is how she travelled, by train. Later she was promoted to lieutenant, but that's a story for another time. Now, if you're lucky, you'll be given this. It's a map of France with all of the train links on it, but you'll notice it's on a silk scarf. Why is it on a silk scarf, not a piece of paper? Anyone want to hazard a guess? You can hide it. It doesn't tear, absolutely. And there's one more thing. You can make it look like it's not actually a map, absolutely, yes. Say that again? Yeah, absolutely, it doesn't make a noise. All of those are valid, very good, very impressed. Yes, it doesn't tear. A piece of paper can only be folded so many times before it tears. This is also water repellent, whereas water will soak up, again, make the map soggy, easily fall apart. This can be folded up so small, I'm not going to be able to do it now, but then it can fit inside a hollowed out pencil as a way of hiding it, or it can be sewn into the inside of your clothes. You could even try wearing it as a scarf, but I wouldn't risk it. But that is why it was on a silk scarf as well. Now, the last role, which is very, very important indeed, has to do with my lovely little mini suitcase that I have here on the table. This is a very crude version of what you'll be carrying as a wireless operator. Who here has heard of Morse code? Sending away, dots and dashes. For those of you who haven't, imagine using an old-style Nokia phone and trying to send a text message on your buttons. It took a very long time. It's a very similar thing. Now, this is a very crude example because it would have been a bigger suitcase, it would have been heavier, and it would have had a lot more equipment in it, but you did have this. Now, those dots and dashes turned into an alphabet, and we send messages to and from different resistance groups and back and forth from France to England and so on and so forth. Not only did you have to send the message, you had to listen to it as it was coming back and translate it back into English. Now you can see this top line here is just saying the word hello. So it's going to take a very, very long time, which did mean that unfortunately a wireless operator's life expectancy at that time was only 6 weeks because of how likely it was that you'd be captured. Especially as well, in our early forms of this design, you had to plug into power supplies. And if you're listening to a transmission and you turn off the power supply, which is what the Nazis did, and the transmission stops, you knew that they were nearby, near vicinity. So, this was dangerous work, but very important. Now, I've come to the end of my talk, and I will leave the lieutenant behind and return to you as India, because she can be a bit exhausting, and she really does go on. But, if you have any other questions about the SOE or the people who serve, feel free to come up and ask me for some Q&A at the end. One thing I will mention though is these wonderful men and women didn't all come from well-off backgrounds. They weren't from Oxbridge. They were ordinary men and women who had ordinary jobs beforehand, postman, teacher, baker. They took on this task, they became an agent, and some of them unfortunately lost their lives. Some of them didn't, they came back. And not only did they come back and have to deal with all of the stuff that they had experienced, they had to keep it a secret from their friends, their families, their loved ones. There's even cases of a couple went for a reunion at Bletchley Park, and they were married, and they both discovered that they'd worked at Bletchley Park and not known that each other worked at Bletchley Park, because that's how secret it was kept. But they were fantastic men and women, and you can learn more about them from me or from many other sources out there. However, let's talk. That's the boring bit. This is the fun bit. You can now, if you'd like to, come up and have a hold of the weapons that I have here on the table. However, safety is important, and just as the way it is rude to point at somebody, please don't ever point a gun at someone here, in the museum or anywhere in fact. When you're holding these weapons, don't point it out. The best thing to do, for example with the Colt, is to point it at the fireplace like that. So don't point it at me, but point it at the fireplace. I will say please do not move any of the working parts. I know it's tempting, but please don't. I say that for a reason, it's for your safety, and also these are very old, so please don't pull back on anything, don't pull the trigger. You can hold it and admire it as much as you like, just don't do any of that with any of these weapons, especially the Liberator. Don't start pulling it apart. But I'll be checking if you were all listening to the way I said to hold this weapon. If you listened earlier to the proper way, I shall be making sure. But again, hold it tight to you and against, pointing towards the fireplace for pictures and all sorts. You can come up and have a try at loading my magazine, either by hand or using my loaders here that you would have had. You can come and say hello to my rat. He does get a bit neglected on this table of goodies. And you can also hold the knife. Now this is a replica made by Pooley Sword, who later took over Wilkinson's sword. It isn't the real thing, but it is a little bit sharp on the top, so just be careful. Don't stick it up anyone's nose, okay? Don't run away with any of the stuff that I have here on the table, because I will chase you. Yeah, just keep it pointed upright at all times. That is everything I have to say. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for listening so intently to me waffle on. But enjoy the rest of your time in the museum. We have some other wonderful shows on. I'll be on again doing my talk about shield maidens on the war stage if you're interested. But we have another fight demonstration, two-handed sword in the tournament gallery, which is very, very cool. So do check that out. But if not, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please click on the like button below so that I know what people like and I know what to make more of. Alternatively, if you've enjoyed it and think you'd like to see more, please click on the subscribe button. That way you get notified by YouTube whenever I bring out a new video. And you never know, there might be something in there that you hadn't considered, because I do cover a variety of things on the channel. And finally, if you have a little bit of cash going, I now have a Patreon account. I'm always looking for patrons, because at the end of the day, let's be perfectly honest, it's a good way for me to get a little bit of money that will use to buy review items or to travel to museums and so on. I don't put a huge amount on that. At the minute, all we've got is one tier charging £1 a month, which just, as I said, helps cover my costs. See you soon.